Hi there. Once a year, on the first frosty night, the villagers wake up and no longer remember what fire is. They squint hopelessly at cold hearths, fumble the strange stones in their hands, and argue about how to approach the long forgotten secret of warmth. But before you get comfortable, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing where everyone is joining from. Now, settle in and make yourself cozy. We're about to begin. It is the sort of morning that promises absolutely nothing remarkable, and you would likely believe it if not for the sense, slow and crawling as frost up your spine, that something is not quite right. You wake, as you always do, to the familiar, ceaseless creaking of the beams above your bed. The straw beneath you smells the same as ever, a dull reminder that you are not, nor have you ever been, a person of particular importance. You stare at the ceiling for some time, wondering why your breath is so visible in the air, but decide that perhaps the world is simply colder than usual. Only when you swing your feet to the floor and shuffle towards the dark corner where a stone sits, black, soot stained, odd in its placement, do you truly begin to realize that the ordinary morning has abandoned you for the time being. You crouch beside the stone. It has always been there, though you cannot quite recall why. You pick it up and feel the roughness beneath your fingertips. The memory of what this stone is for should come easily. It ought to be as natural as breathing or cursing the rooster outside your window. Yet, the purpose eludes you. You stand there, awkward and uncertain, as the wind snakes its way through the cracks in your door. The sun is not up, but the dim gray that seeps into your cottage is enough to see that nothing burns in the hearth. The hearth itself is simply a sad blackened hole filled with cold ash and last year's regrets. You do not feel particularly worried. After all, if something had been lost, surely it would be a thing worth mourning, and you feel only a mild inconvenience, like discovering you are out of salt when the soup is already boiling. You attempt to recall the previous night. Did you not sit beside the same hearth, watching something bright and warm? Was there a smell, a sound? The memory dissolves like morning mist. Not wanting to admit defeat to a stone and a pile of ash, you decide to busy yourself with other chores. You gather up the day's bread, hard and uninspiring, and pour yourself a cup of what might optimistically be called milk. You chew in silence, the cold seeping into your bones, but you assure yourself that this too is normal. Winter is never kind in this place. Perhaps that is all. As you eat, a voice from outside calls your name. It is your neighbor, old Marta, whose voice is almost as grating as the squeal of the village piglets. She does not wait for you to answer, pushing open your door with an abruptness that only the very old and the very tired can muster. She looks at you, then at the unlit hearth, and then at the stone in your hand. Her lips part as if to scold you, but the words do not come. Instead, her brow furrows. Have you, she begins, faltering, have you any idea how to, well, you know, She gestures helplessly at your hearth, her face as blank as your own. For a moment, you wonder if this is a cruel joke, but the confusion in her eyes mirrors your own. She shrugs and leaves, muttering about the weather. You finish your breakfast and go outside. The village is silent in a way you have never noticed before. Not one curl of smoke drifts from any rooftop. There is a gathering by the well, faces you have known your entire life, all staring at one another with expressions of sheepish uncertainty. You join them because that is what one does when the world does not make sense. The blacksmith, who is meant to be the sort of person who knows things, stands at the center, shuffling his feet and mumbling into his beard. Anyone? He asks. Anyone at all? He is holding two rocks in his massive fists, but all he has managed is to chip his thumbnail. You realize that it is not only you. The village, every last forgetful soul, has awoken to the same blankness. You feel strangely comforted by this. There is dignity in collective ignorance. There are theories. Perhaps it is the weather, some suggest. Perhaps it is the curse of last summer's poor harvest. You nod along, though you have no opinion worth sharing. Someone blames the goats, which is almost sensible. You decide, as the first truly official act of this peculiar day, to take a walk. You notice details you have always ignored. The doors are closed. The dogs do not bark. No one is scolding children for getting too close to the flames because there are no flames to get close to. You stand outside your cottage, rubbing your hands together for warmth, and stare at the clouds overhead. You wonder, briefly, what it would feel like to have a world that makes sense from beginning to end. You think you would be bored. When night finally begins its slow descent, the village huddles inside. You wrap yourself in every blanket you own and stare at the empty hearth, the strange stone still in your palm. You wonder if, tomorrow, the world will reveal its secrets. For now there is only cold and the quiet comfort of shared confusion, and of course, the creeping suspicion that this has all happened before. The following morning greets you with a cold so persistent and unremarkable that it seems intent on seeping into your bones, setting up a home there, and inviting distant, equally miserable relatives to join. Your teeth chatter with the rhythm of an old loom. You lie in bed a little longer than usual, wishing the air would do you the favor of warming up on its own. Of course, it does not. Outside, there is no hint of the familiar smoke that once lazily twisted above every cottage, no matter how poor. The sky is the color of old milk, and the fields are empty, as if the village has decided that venturing out is a risky business best left to the truly desperate. You do not recall a time when the entire village has been quite so silent. Silence is, after all, unnatural in a place where everyone knows everyone else's bad habits and tragic secrets. Yet this morning, the silence is a new kind of neighbor, awkward, chilly, and refusing to make eye contact. After a half-hearted breakfast, consisting of bread with more holes than substance, and a cup of water that tastes faintly of mud, you shuffle out into the muddy lane. There, you see old Marta again, this time armed with a large spoon and a suspicious look. She stares at her own empty hearth with the sort of confusion usually reserved for lost livestock. You nod at her, feeling a camaraderie forged in mutual befuddlement. She shrugs, as if you are to blame, then trudges off toward the village square. You follow. After all, what else is there to do? The center of the village is already filling up, people in layers of wool and patched linen, all rubbing their hands together and exchanging nervous glances. The blacksmith is there, his apron dusted with ash that now seems entirely ornamental. He clears his throat. Well, he says, his voice carrying more authority than his posture suggests, we appear to have a problem. The assembled villagers mutter agreement. Someone suggests that it is all a trick of the mind, a shared dream from which none of you has properly awoken. The miller's wife, ever the practical one, points out that she has pinched herself several times already, and nothing has changed. You are asked for your opinion, which is odd, as you are not in the habit of being consulted on matters of village wide importance. You mumble something about the weather, which is met with a collective sigh. One of the children, a small girl with hair like a mouse's nest, tugs at your sleeve. What is supposed to happen in the hearth? She asks, her eyes wide. You crouch down, attempting to explain. The words tumble out: heat, light, something about warmth, but nothing lands. The child's expression is unchanged. You might as well be describing the concept of joy to a stone. The village priest appears, shuffling toward the crowd with the air of a man expecting to be ignored, but secretly hoping otherwise. He raises his hands in what is either a gesture of blessing or surrender. My children, he intones, it seems we are faced with a test. Perhaps the gods wish us to rediscover what has been lost. There are some nods, a few muttered prayers. You suspect that if the gods had intended to test your collective memory, they might have started with something less critical, like the recipe for turnip stew. Someone, perhaps it is you, though it is hard to say for certain, suggests that the solution may be found in the objects you all hold so dearly: flints, stones, sticks. A few brave souls attempt to strike their stones together, but the result is only a rain of dust and a chorus of disappointed sighs. The baker's boy, never one to let common sense interfere with creativity, proposes that perhaps the answer is to rub sticks together. A group gathers around him, and soon the square is filled with the sound of desperate friction, as if the entire village has decided to create heat through the power of irritation alone. No smoke appears, only a growing sense of futility. Your mind drifts. You try to remember if there is a time before fire, but the memories are slippery, refusing to stay in place. All you have is a vague sense that the world was colder, harder, more dangerous. An argument breaks out between the shepherd and the tanner. The shepherd is certain that the solution involves sheep's wool, while the tanner insists that only leather will do. The discussion escalates until both are waving their respective materials in each other's faces, achieving nothing but entertainment for the rest of you. The blacksmith, in an act of quiet rebellion, attempts to light his forge by staring at it intensely, as if sheer willpower will be enough. It is not. By midday, the sense of unity begins to fray. Some villagers return to their homes, grumbling about wasted time. Others linger, reluctant to admit defeat, as if the answer might simply materialize if enough people glare at the problem. You decide to walk through the village, taking in the oddity of it all. Children play in the street, inventing new games that do not require warmth or light. The animals, unaffected, go about their business with an enviable ignorance. In the market square, you notice a group of elders sitting together in a tight circle, their faces grave. You join them, expecting wisdom, but receive only shrugs and reminiscences about warmer days. It is as if the knowledge simply slipped away. One says, I remember teaching my son how to feed the fire, but now I cannot even picture it. You realize, with a cold sort of amusement, that none of you can recall when or how you learned. It has always just been there, until, of course, it was not. By sunset, the village is a patchwork of silent cottages, each with its own dark, empty hearth. You sit by your window and watch as the sky turns from gray to indigo, stars blinking into existence one by one. It is a beautiful sight, though you cannot help but feel that it would be better appreciated with a little warmth at your back. As night deepens, a hush settles over the village. It is not the comfortable silence of shared company, but rather the uneasy quiet of uncertainty. You wrap yourself in your heaviest blanket and lie awake, listening to the soft complaints of the wind. In the stillness, a thought crosses your mind. Perhaps tomorrow someone will remember. Perhaps the knowledge will return as quietly as it left. Until then, you and your neighbors are united by your confusion, a peculiar sort of community, held together not by understanding, but by the mystery of your collective forgetfulness. You drift into uneasy sleep, wondering if you will dream of warmth, or if, even in your dreams, the fire will remain lost. The third morning arrives, but the world is neither softer nor warmer. You open your eyes to the dismal realization that the cold has only deepened its grip, and there is not the faintest pulse of a solution drifting on the air. Your cottage is filled with silence, except for the occasional, slightly alarming pop from the ceiling, as if some ancient spirit trapped in the beams has decided to express its displeasure at the state of things. As you sit up, shivering beneath your thin blanket, you notice movement through the window. The village green is crowded with geese, not a handful as usual, but an entire army of white, feathered bodies. Their numbers seem greater than ever, dozens, perhaps hundreds, all huddled together in the middle of the square, gossiping among themselves with the brazen disregard of creatures that know they have nothing to fear from humans today. The sight of them fills you with an odd, inexplicable suspicion. There is something different about these geese. They are standing taller, you think, and their eyes seem brighter, as if they are in on a secret that the rest of you are not allowed to know. You pull on your boots, a slow and awkward task in the cold, and shuffle outside. The frost bites at your fingers as you make your way toward the square. The villagers have gathered again, though there is less energy in the crowd now, more resignation. The only enthusiasm to be found is among the geese, who strut about as though the village belongs to them. You watch as old Marta attempts to chase the geese away from the well. They scatter, but not in fear. They move with calculated elegance, slipping through the crowd, honking quietly, as if engaged in some serious discussion about your collective incompetence. The blacksmith stands nearby, glaring at the geese with undisguised hostility. They look too pleased, he mutters, crossing his arms over his broad chest. They know something. You find yourself nodding. It is absurd, of course, to blame the geese for your sudden inability to remember fire, but what other explanation is there? The logic of the desperate mind is not logical at all. It is simply convenient. A group of children run up, each carrying sticks. Let's try again, they say, and they begin to rub the sticks together, a now familiar ritual that produces nothing but a little warmth from their frantic energy. The geese watch, entirely unimpressed. You remember a time, a vague, foggy recollection, when you once used a feather to tickle your younger sister until she squealed. The memory floats away as soon as you try to catch it, like everything else about fire. The only memories that seem truly reliable are those that involve geese. For some reason, geese are always there, always meddling, always just a bit too present. Your suspicion grows. You watch as a particularly large goose, whom you recognize as the one who once stole a potato right from your kitchen, marches through the legs of the villagers and hops onto the stone rim of the well. The creature surveys the crowd with an imperial gaze, and you could almost swear it winks at you. You decide, in a fit of cold and frustration, to conduct an experiment. If the geese are to blame, surely their presence must be interrupted. You gather a group of fellow conspirators, mostly children and one or two adults, who are bored enough to follow your lead. Your plan is simple. You will form a human chain and herd the geese away from the village square, hoping that in their absence, the solution to the fire will miraculously appear. It is an ambitious plan. It is also, inevitably, a disaster. The geese are cleverer than you expect. They move as a single, shifting mass, darting through gaps in your formation, flapping their wings and honking indignantly. The children shriek and laugh, tripping over one another, and before long, the square is filled with chaos, feathers, and a rising chorus of human and avian voices. At one point, you manage to corner a particularly smug goose, but when you attempt to seize it, it bites you firmly on the finger. The pain is sharp, and the indignity sharper. The goose stares you down, then waddles off, victorious. The villagers eventually give up, collapsing in the mud, breathless and defeated. The geese regroup, unharmed and, if anything, even more triumphant. You sit on the edge of the well, sucking your bitten finger, and try to recall why you ever thought this would work. The blacksmith sits beside you, shaking his head. Maybe it is not the geese, he says quietly. Maybe it is something in us. You do not want to believe him. It is easier to blame the geese. They are right there, after all, and you have never trusted an animal that can hiss and bite in equal measure. Besides, The alternative is too unsettling that you and everyone you know have simply forgotten something as essential as fire. As the morning turns to afternoon, the villagers drift away, defeated by both the cold and the geese. The square is once again the domain of feathers and small, muddy footprints. You return to your cottage, closing the door behind you with a heavy sigh. You sit by the empty hearth, wrapping your hands around a cup of cold water, and try not to think about how ridiculous the morning has been. The geese are, no doubt, still outside, plotting their next move. You wonder what it must be like to be a goose, to never worry about warmth or memory or the judgment of your neighbors, to be free of the burdens of knowledge and to live entirely in the present, honking and biting at will. You find yourself almost envying them. That night, you sleep fitfully, dreaming of flocks of geese flying overhead, their wings catching sparks of light that vanish as soon as they appear. In your dream, you chase them, reaching for something just out of reach, a warmth that promises comfort but always slips away. You wake to another cold morning, the memory of the dream fading, but your suspicion remains. The geese, you are certain, are involved, if only you could prove it. But for now, all you have is your bitten finger, an empty hearth, and a growing sense that the solution to your village's predicament lies somewhere between the absurd and the impossible, and perhaps a step or two closer to the geese than you would like to admit. Morning arrives in a sluggish, unfriendly sort of way, as though even the sun has grown weary of watching the villagers' confusion. The cold has settled into your bones, and the days now blend together, defined only by their particular shades of discomfort. You wake, hungry and unimpressed by the unchanging view from your window, gray sky, geese, and the occasional miserable looking neighbor shuffling past your door with purpose but no direction. Despite yesterday's embarrassment with the geese, there is a feeling among the villagers that today must be different. You sense it in the way people gather on the village green, their movements brisker, their expressions more determined. This is a day, everyone agrees, for action, even if no one knows what form that action ought to take. The blacksmith, displaying an optimism you have not previously suspected, organizes another meeting near the well. He bangs two pots together as a summons, and the resulting cacophony draws the villagers from their homes like moths to an unlit flame. You follow, drawn by the vague hope that someone, somewhere, will remember what to do. Once again, the geese are in attendance. They line the edge of the gathering, their beady eyes reflecting a proprietary interest in the proceedings. You try to ignore them, though you can still feel the phantom pain of yesterday's bite in your finger. The baker's wife is the first to speak. "If fire is lost," she declares, "we must find a new way. My grandmother always said a pot of hot milk can cure anything." There are thoughtful murmurs. Milk is something the village has in abundance, warm, fresh from the cow, or at least not as cold as the air. Several villagers trudge back to their cottages and return, arms full of sloshing pails. The idea takes on a life of its own. "Add onions," suggests old Marta, who claims onions are the cure for all ailments of body and soul. Others throw in their own advice. Add salt, add bread, add anything that might have the faintest whiff of warmth or memory. You contribute reluctantly a wilted carrot from your stores. Soon the villagers gather around an impressive array of pots and pails. The blacksmith lends his forge, still cold and silent, as a platform for the experiment. With great ceremony, you all pour your ingredients together, stirring the resulting slop with spoons, sticks, and the occasional hopeful chant. As the pot fills, there is a collective sense of anticipation. Someone points out that nothing is actually happening. The mixture is just sitting there, lukewarm at best, and thoroughly unappetizing at worst. The children are the first to lose interest. They wander away, giggling and daring each other to taste the strange brew. You remain, staring into the milky, onion laden depths, willing it to do something, anything, resembling fire. Someone, perhaps in desperation, suggests adding alcohol. The brewer is fetched, and soon the concoction takes on a pungent aroma that does nothing to inspire confidence. A brave soul tastes it and immediately coughs, eyes watering. The mood, which had started with a sense of hopeful collaboration, now sours. The mixture refuses to transform. No heat, no light, not even a modest bubble. The villagers glare at the pot as though sheer collective annoyance might coax it into cooperation. Old Marta, determined to salvage her reputation, declares that the milk onion potion is meant to be applied externally. She smears a little on her forehead and waits. Nothing happens, apart from a few polite questions about her general well being. The blacksmith, with his usual practicality, suggests that the experiment is a failure. There are nods of agreement, though nobody wants to be the first to say it aloud. The villagers disperse, muttering about wasted food and the folly of listening to old wives' tales. You help clean up the mess. The geese, sensing opportunity, swoop in and begin to peck at the leftovers. Their enthusiasm is the only success of the morning. You return to your cottage with a heavy heart and an empty stomach. The cold feels even more biting than before, and your hands are sticky with spilled milk. You sit by your hearth, staring into the darkness, and wonder what has become of common sense in this village. Later, you hear laughter outside. The children have discovered a new game, chasing the geese with onions tied to sticks. The geese, for their part, seem utterly unperturbed. They flap their wings, honk, and occasionally steal an onion from an unwary child. You cannot help but smile despite everything. The village may have failed to rediscover fire, but it has at least found a way to entertain itself, if only for a little while. As evening falls, you reflect on the day's efforts. It occurs to you that there is a kind of comfort in collective foolishness, a warmth of a different sort. You are not alone in your confusion. The entire village is muddling through together, clinging to rituals and remedies that offer more hope than substance. You promise yourself that tomorrow you will try again. Surely, you think, someone will remember. Fire cannot be gone for good. It is too important, too essential, too woven into the fabric of life to simply vanish. As darkness settles, you wrap yourself in blankets and listen to the sound of distant honking. The geese are having a feast, celebrating the day's failures in their own noisy fashion. You drift off to sleep with the smell of milk and onions lingering in the air, dreaming of warmth and light that, for now, remains stubbornly out of reach. If there is one universal truth in the village, it is that when all else fails, you turn to those who have seen the most winters. The elders, after all, have survived blizzards, plagues, famines, and at least two incidents involving runaway carts of turnips. Surely, if anyone remembers the lost art of fire, it is they. You wake before dawn, the cold a relentless companion. The air inside your cottage is brittle, so sharp you almost expect to see frost blooming on your breath. The stone hearth gapes at you, black and empty, as if waiting for you to admit defeat. Instead, you wrap yourself in every layer of clothing you own and venture out, determined to restore order, or at least dignity, to the day. You are not alone. Others have risen early, driven by the same stubborn hope. There is a general sense that something must be done, and soon, before the cold worms its way into your heart and refuses to leave. You gather in the square, shuffling awkwardly in the half light, your breath rising in clouds. It is you who voices what everyone is thinking. Let us gather the elders, you say. They have lived longer than any of us. They must remember. The proposal is met with a chorus of tired agreement. Someone is dispatched to fetch old Marta, who is in her own way both ancient and unstoppable. Others go in search of Grandfather Peter, a man whose beard is long enough to have its own reputation. The rest of the council is rounded up. Widow Olga, who has not smiled since her third husband disappeared into the woods. Master Ivan, who once claimed to have wrestled a bear and is too proud to deny it now, and the quiet Sister Agnes, who outlived everyone who doubted her. Soon the elders are assembled in the great room of the communal hall. The place is not much warmer than the outdoors, but at least it is free of geese. You find a seat on the edge of the gathering, your back to the wall, watching as the elders arrange themselves in a haphazard circle. Each carries some token of age, a cane, a shawl, a flask of something pungent and medicinal. Grandfather Peter begins, clearing his throat with the gravity of someone about to impart wisdom. In my day, he says, fire was not a luxury. It was a necessity. We knew its value. We respected it, not like the youth today. He is interrupted by old Marta, who is in no mood for nostalgia. This is not about respect, she snaps. It is about remembering. I cannot recall a thing. It is as if my mind is wrapped in fog. Widow Olga nods, pulling her shawl tighter. I remember the warmth and the way the flames danced, but I cannot say how we made it. The details are gone, only the feeling remains. The others murmur agreement. You listen, a little dismayed. The council, it seems, is no less confused than the rest of you. They remember fragments, the smell of burning wood, the crackle in the silence, the way firelight flickered on the faces of friends long gone. but none can recall the steps, the flint, the tinder, the spark. Even the word spark feels hollow, stripped of meaning. The discussion grows more animated. Master Ivan swears that as a boy, he once saw fire leap from the sky during a storm. Sister Agnes suggests that prayer might help, though even she sounds unconvinced. Old Marta insists there was a special log, used only on the darkest nights, but she cannot remember where it came from or what made it special. You offer your own memories, such as they are, nights spent by the hearth, stories told in shadows, the comfort of warmth. The elders nod, but no one is any closer to the answer. Frustration creeps in. Accusations begin, gentle at first, then sharper. Someone blames the weather. Someone else blames the children, who are always losing things. The idea is floated that the village is cursed, and the geese, ever the convenient scapegoats, are mentioned once more. Finally, Grandfather Peter holds up a hand. Perhaps, he says, it is not about remembering a trick, but about finding a new way. If our minds have failed us, we must rely on our wits. This, at least, is something. You propose an inventory. Everyone should bring any object, memory, or story that even remotely concerns fire. Maybe, with enough fragments, you can reconstruct what was lost. The council agrees. The meeting dissolves into a low murmur of plans. Villagers are dispatched to search their cottages for anything that might help. Flints, old candles, bits of charred wood, forgotten tools. You feel a flicker, if not of hope, then at least of momentum. For the first time in days, there is a sense of purpose, a belief that the answer is within reach. As you leave the hall, you overhear old Marta muttering to herself. It is like a song half remembered. The tune is there, but the words have flown. You step outside into the biting air. The geese watch you from a safe distance, as if aware that their place as suspects is not secure. The sky above is pale and indifferent. You rub your hands together, imagining warmth, and promise yourself that you will not give up. Not today. You spend the afternoon knocking on doors, collecting the relics of fire from neighbors, both hopeful and resigned. By evening, the communal hall is filled with objects, stones, sticks, bits of cloth, a half melted candle that no one recalls lighting. The elders inspect each item with the seriousness of judges at a festival. The process is painstaking and the results inconclusive. Some items are dismissed with a shake of the head. Others are placed in a growing pile of maybes, their significance as mysterious as ever. As the light fades, you realize that nothing has changed. The cold is as sharp, the hearths as empty, but the village feels different now, united by the effort, if not by the outcome. There is comfort in the company of others, a sense that even in confusion, you are not alone. You leave the hall at dusk, your breath clouding before you. The geese are settling in for the night, untroubled by your struggles. You watch them for a moment, then turn away, determined to face the cold with a little more resolve. You climb into bed, every muscle aching from the day's work. As sleep takes you, you hear, in the darkness, The soft murmur of voices in the hall, the elders still searching for answers, refusing to surrender to forgetfulness. And in your dreams, you stand once more before the hearth, waiting for a flame that does not come. But you are not alone. The whole village stands with you, their faces lit by the faint glow of hope. The morning after the council of elders, the village is blanketed in a silence so thorough it might as well be a layer of frost. You wake with a sense of unfinished business, your dreams tangled in half remembered rituals, and the persistent image of old Marta trying to light a fire with sheer force of will. The cold has become a permanent feature of life, almost a member of your household, one you did not invite, cannot ignore, and wish would move out. As you shuffle to the window, you notice a disturbance on the green. The geese are uncharacteristically subdued, huddled together as if waiting for a performance. At the center of the growing crowd is a figure you do not recognize. She is younger than most who gather in the village square, and she stands with a confidence bordering on the reckless. Her shawl is a garish purple, and she wears a necklace of dried berries and bits of colored glass. Word spreads quickly. A new shaman has arrived. You wrap yourself in your least embarrassing coat and join the procession of villagers making their way to the square. The newcomers are always a source of excitement, or at least of distraction, and you are in need of both. As you approach, you hear the girl's voice, clear, sure, and ringing with the authority of someone who has not yet been told she is wrong. I have come, she declares, to help you remember the gift of fire. For every forgetting, there is a remembering, and for every silence, a song. The villagers exchange skeptical glances. You, in particular, feel a mixture of hope and annoyance. Hope, because any solution is better than none. Annoyance, because the last time someone tried to help, it resulted in a pot of lukewarm onion milk and a horde of victorious geese. The blacksmith, speaking for everyone, asks, "And how do you propose to do this?" "With a song," the shaman replies, not missing a beat. "Not just any song, but one sung with true purpose. Fire is a thing of spirit as much as of matter. We must call it back with music." The villagers fall silent. Some, you suspect, are trying to recall if they have ever heard of such a thing. Others are simply too cold to protest. The geese seem to approve, nodding in unison. The shaman claps her hands, beckoning the villagers closer. "Form a circle," she instructs. "Hold hands. Focus your minds on the warmth you have lost." You join the circle, taking the blacksmith's rough palm in one hand and old Marta's surprisingly strong grip in the other. The shaman stands in the center, eyes closed, humming a note that starts low and rises until it fills the air like a thin thread of smoke. She begins to sing. The song is unlike anything you have heard, half lullaby, half chant, woven with words you do not understand and sounds that seem to pull at something deep inside your chest. It is haunting and beautiful and utterly bewildering. You do your best to join in. The villagers follow, their voices uncertain at first, then bolder as the melody grows. Some are hopelessly off key, Others forget the words before they are even sung. A few children begin to giggle, which is contagious, and soon the song is punctuated by snorts and muffled laughter. Despite this, there is a strange power to the moment. The song binds you together, if not in harmony, then at least in shared absurdity. You sing of warmth, of light, of the things you miss and cannot name. You sing for lost memories and for the hope that they will return. The shaman leads you through verse after verse, her voice unwavering. She stamps her feet, claps her hands, and encourages you to do the same. The rhythm catches on, Moon, and for a few minutes, the square is alive with music, movement, and something that almost feels like joy. But then the song ends, as all songs must. The shaman opens her eyes, expectant. The villagers look around, waiting for a miracle. Nothing happens. The hearths remain dark. The cold is as biting as ever. The only warmth is that of exertion, and even that fades quickly as the crowd disperses. The shaman seems disappointed, but not defeated. Perhaps, she says, the song was not quite right, or perhaps you were not singing with true intent. We must try again, maybe at dusk, when the shadows grow long and the world is between day and night. There are nods of agreement, though they are tinged with reluctance. Some mutter about foolishness, others about hunger. The children resume chasing the geese, who have apparently decided that music is less interesting than leftover onions. You linger as the villagers leave. The shaman approaches, her confidence now touched with uncertainty. It should have worked, she says quietly. In other places, it does. Perhaps your village is stubborn. You smile despite yourself. We are nothing if not stubborn. She laughs, the sound bright and defiant. Then we will sing until something remembers, even if it is only ourselves. That evening, as the sun dips below the horizon, the shaman leads another song. The villagers join, voices raw from cold and repetition. You sing too, because there is nothing else to do, and because, for all the absurdity, you want to believe in the magic of music. The night falls, deep and starless, no fire appears, but as you walk home, you find yourself humming the melody, the notes clinging to you like the hope you are not quite ready to surrender. You sleep, and in your dreams the song echoes, a promise that some memories, once forgotten, can be sung back into the world if only you keep singing long enough. If there is one thing the village possesses in greater supply than confusion, it is potatoes. Potatoes fill every cellar, barrel, and empty patch of earth. They are baked, boiled, mashed, and sometimes, in moments of wild desperation, eaten raw. The elders say that in times of uncertainty, you must turn to what you have. By now, potatoes are what you have. This is why, on the seventh day of firelessness, you awake with an idea as lumpy and unexpected as the potatoes themselves. You rise before dawn, already rehearsing your speech in your head. If fire cannot be remembered, it must be conjured, you say to your reflection in a warped piece of tin. And if it is to be conjured, let it be with the most sacred of village objects. This logic makes little sense, but you are too cold to care. After layering on every available garment, you step outside and crunch across the frost to the village green. You are not the only one who has decided that action is preferable to shivering indoors. The blacksmith is there, rubbing his hands and eyeing the horizon as if waiting for inspiration to arrive by wagon. The geese, ever present, waddle by in a restless cluster, keeping a suspicious eye on you. You announce your plan. We will create a magic circle of potatoes. The villagers blink, uncertain if this is a joke or a desperate plea for distraction, but they are eager for purpose. Soon, they disappear into their cottages, returning one by one with sacks, baskets, and aprons bulging with potatoes of all shapes and sizes. Some are perfectly round and golden, others knobby and vaguely alarming. All are offered up as if participating in a sacred rite. You arrange the potatoes in a careful circle at the center of the green, placing the largest and most misshapen ones at the four cardinal points. For balance, you say, with as much gravitas as you can muster. The children, gleeful to have an official task, help fill the spaces between, forming a lumpy but determined ring. It quickly becomes a community event. Old Marta brings a bucket of parsnips for extra magic, she insists, and tucks them between the potatoes. The baker's wife adds a loaf of bread as a hopeful offering. Even the shaman, whose songs have yet to produce more than mild headaches, sprinkles a handful of dried herbs around the perimeter. Someone suggests lighting candles, but no one remembers how. You stand back to admire the creation. It was, by any reasonable measure, ridiculous. But in the face of unyielding cold and memory loss, the village has grown fond of ridiculousness. Now comes the ritual. The shaman, adopting her best solemn expression, instructs everyone to join hands and walk clockwise around the circle, chanting whatever words come to mind. The chanting quickly degenerates into a medley of half remembered prayers, potato recipes, and the names of favorite cows. You join in, loudly reciting your Aunt Nadia's famous potato stew instructions. The geese, naturally, are drawn to the spectacle. They gather just outside the circle, heads bobbing, eyeing the potatoes with growing interest. One bold goose slips between the villagers and pecks at a particularly lumpy specimen, but is shooed away by the blacksmith, who has declared himself keeper of the ritual. After 3 full circuits of the circle, everyone stops, slightly dizzy and more than a little embarrassed. The shaman raises her arms to the sky and pronounces, "If the spirit of fire is with us, let it show itself now." There is a collective pause. All eyes focus on the potato circle. The air is thick with expectation and visible breath. You hold your own, certain that at the very least, this will become a story to tell future generations. Possibly as a warning, nothing happens. Not even the smallest wisp of smoke, nor the faintest glimmer of warmth. The only movement comes from the geese, who seize the opportunity to rush the circle, pecking wildly at the magical tubers. The villagers scatter, laughing and shouting, as the sacred circle is reduced to chaos in a flurry of feathers, and flying potatoes. You cannot help but laugh. The absurdity of it all, the ritual, the chanting, the invasion of geese, is too much for even the sternest villager. For a few moments, the square rings with the sound of honest laughter, something rarer than fire these days. When the commotion subsides, you and your neighbors gather the surviving potatoes and parsnips, returning them to their respective cellars with an air of defeat mixed with relief. The baker's wife salvages her loaf, muttering that it was not meant for birds. Despite the failure, there is a strange sense of satisfaction. The cold remains, the hearths are dark, but the heaviness in your chest is lighter. The villagers linger, exchanging stories of other failed rituals, one involving cabbages and a wheelbarrow, another that included singing to a particularly stubborn goat. You spend the afternoon with the children, building potato creatures in the snow, their lopsided forms smiling up at you with carved eyes and crooked grins. Even the elders stop by to offer advice. Add more parsnips. Use red potatoes for luck. Never, under any circumstances, trust a goose with anything important. As the day draws to a close, you stand on the edge of the green, surveying the scattered remains of your magic circle. The shaman joins you, her purple shawl trailing in the slush. It was a good ritual, she says, not quite meeting your eyes. Sometimes the magic is in the trying. You nod, unsure whether you agree, but grateful for the company. The stars appear, faint and cold above the rooftops, and you wonder how many more nights the village will endure before someone remembers or invents the secret of fire. Back in your cottage, you find a stray potato in your pocket. You place it on the mantel, a small token of hope. Tomorrow, you tell yourself, someone will have a better idea. Until then, you dream of warmth, of fires conjured not by memory or magic, but by the stubborn, potato hearted will of a village, determined not to be defeated by winter or forgetfulness. Evening descends with an insistent chill, an ancient authority that pays no heed to the villagers' efforts. It comes slowly at first, as if granting you time to prepare, but then, all at once, it is simply there, darkness falling like a heavy, unwashed blanket over the entire village. The sun, pale and weary, slips behind the woods and does not look back. There is no protest, no promise of return until morning, for as long as you can remember, and your memory, unreliable as it is, insists this was always so. Night has not been a thing to fear. There were always flames to keep it at bay, a hearth's glow, a candle's wink, a torch burning by the door. Even the poorest cottage had a stub of something to light, a defense against the enveloping dark. Tonight, the village faces the void, collectively and spectacularly unprepared. You feel it first in the air. The cold, which all day was a background irritation, grows teeth as the sky deepens from iron to ink. It presses at the windows and seeps through every gap in the walls. Your breath floats, visible and mocking, as you gather what meager resources you can: blankets, coats, the thickest pair of socks you own. From your window, you watch as other villagers hurry about, voices muffled, faces pale in the fading light. There is a rush to finish chores, to bring the animals inside, to check on neighbors. A few attempt one last, half hearted round of potato circle magic, but abandon it when the geese begin to demand tribute. Soon, the green is empty, the only sound the crunch of frost and the occasional indignant honk. Inside your cottage, you prepare for night as best you can. You stack blankets on the bed until it looks like a burial mound, then wedge yourself beneath, cocooned and motionless. You try reading, but your eyes struggle in the dimness. The book is just a series of vague shapes, the words sliding into nonsense. It occurs to you that you may be the last person in the village still pretending to read after sunset. Time passes, measured only by the diminishing sensation in your toes. You wonder what the others are doing, how the blacksmith fares in his forge, whether old Marta is muttering curses at the darkness, if the shaman is composing new songs in the hope that music can outlast memory. Outside, a dog howls. The sound is raw and unpracticed, the voice of an animal unused to true darkness. Soon, more join in, dogs, then goats, then, absurdly, a goose. You imagine a chorus of complaint rising up to the sky, only to be swallowed by the night. Sleep is elusive. Your mind drifts through half formed memories, shadows flickering on the wall, laughter around a fire, warmth that once seemed as ordinary as breathing. Now, the absence of fire is not just an inconvenience, but a presence of its own, vast, cold, and unsettlingly patient. At some point, you realize you are not the only one awake. From across the lane, you hear voices, low, urgent, carrying the unmistakable edge of fear. Someone is knocking on a neighbor's door. A child cries, comforted by a parent's murmured assurances. The village, for all its stoic resolve, is discovering just how much of life depends on the certainty of light. You rise, stumbling through the darkness, and wrap yourself in your thickest shawl. Outside, the world is a study in shadows. The stars are pitiless and bright, offering no warmth, only the promise of their own distant fires. You see silhouettes moving from cottage to cottage, delivering spare blankets, checking for the frail and the forgotten. At the edge of the green, you spot the shaman standing alone, arms wrapped around herself, face turned to the sky. You join her, and for a moment, you both stand in silence, listening to the world as it settles into its unfamiliar cold. It feels bigger, she says at last. The night, as if it's swallowing everything. You nod, unsure whether she expects comfort or simply company. Do you think it will remember us? You ask, surprising yourself with the question. She considers this. Maybe it never forgets. Maybe it's us who have to remember every night what it means to wait for the dawn. You want to reply, but your teeth are chattering too hard for philosophy. The shaman smiles and retreats to her own cottage, leaving you alone beneath the indifferent stars. You return inside, grateful for walls if nothing else, and try to sleep. It is not easy. Every creak and groan of the house is amplified, every rustle outside a possible threat. You pull the blankets tighter, breathing in the scent of old wool and dust, and close your eyes, counting heartbeats and trying to imagine the feel of heat. You do not dream, not really. Instead, your mind drifts in the kind of restless, waking state that is neither sleep nor awareness. You are aware, always, of the dark. You wonder how many nights it will take for this to become normal, and whether you will ever stop missing the old comforts, the glow, the crackle, the company of a simple flame. When morning comes, it is not with relief, but with a dull, resigned ache. The light is thin, as if afraid to commit, and the cold has not retreated. But you survived. The village survived. This, for now, will have to be enough. In the distance, a goose honks, reminding you that absurdity, at least, is a constant. You rise, blinking in the pale dawn, and begin the day with the strange pride of one who has endured the longest night, together with all the other cold and forgetful souls. If darkness breeds reflection, cold breeds argument. The morning after the first truly fireless night arrives reluctantly, as if ashamed of what it finds. The light outside your window is thin and nervous, a pale spill across the frost rimmed glass, not so much illuminating as admitting that, yes, day still follows night, though with a little enthusiasm. You awaken with a stiffness in your limbs that feels ancient and undeserved. Your fingers ache, your nose is numb, and your blanket has all the insulating properties of a damp cabbage leaf. Before you even rise, you know that nobody in the village has slept well. Night without fire is a slow siege, and you are among the first of its battered survivors. Your breath steams in the air as you dress, layer upon shivering layer. You peer outside. The lane is already alive with movement, more frantic, more clipped than usual. You see your neighbors stumbling from their cottages, rubbing their arms and stamping their feet, faces drawn and impatient. The cold has not united you in resilience. It has turned you all into grumbling, quarrelsome shadows of yourselves. At the well, a line has already formed. Old Marta is there, jabbing her ladle at anyone who gets too close. Her hair is wild, her expression wilder. She scolds the baker's boy for stepping ahead in line, then mutters something about his mother's bread being no better than last year's straw. The boy, tired and cold, returns fire with a string of creative insults about Marta's soup, her goats, and her prospects in the afterlife. This sets the tone for the morning. The blacksmith stomps into the square, demanding to know why his boots have frozen solid by the door. Clearly, someone else's fault. The miller's wife retorts that the blacksmith's forge, which once cast a reassuring glow across the square, is now nothing but a chilly, sooty embarrassment. She suggests that perhaps the forge is empty because the blacksmith himself is lacking in. She hesitates, glancing at the children, the necessary spark. This is, for reasons beyond your frozen comprehension, the funniest thing the children have heard all week. Soon they are chanting, "No spark, no spark," as they chase each other through the lane. The blacksmith pretends not to notice, but his cheeks burn redder than any fire you have ever seen. Meanwhile, a new controversy erupts over how best to keep warm. Old Marta claims that sitting on sacks of potatoes is the key to survival. The shepherd insists that only constant movement will save you and demonstrates with a series of exaggerated stomps that fail to impress anyone but the goats. The brewer, whose cellars remain the only warm place in the village, for reasons nobody can quite explain, claims that a cup of his strongest brew will make you forget the cold entirely, if not your own name. In the midst of the bickering, you attempt to mediate. Perhaps, you offer, we could pool our resources, share the warmest corners, but your suggestion is lost in a flurry of new arguments. Who has the warmest cottage? Whose blankets are the least infested with mice? Who was the first to realize that fire was gone? Every villager seems intent on proving they are the most put upon, the coldest, the most deserving of sympathy. At some point, Sister Agnes, quiet, unflappable, emerges from her cottage and silences the crowd with a single, sharp whistle. Quarreling will not bring back the fire, she declares, nor will it warm your toes. Get on with your chores, or go back to bed. A brief hush falls. The villagers, chastened, scatter to their various occupations. The baker's boy stomps off, muttering under his breath. Old Marta glowers, but returns to her cottage. The children attempt to organize a potato stacking contest, then abandon it when a goose steals the prize potato. You find yourself wandering through the square, feeling both isolated and oddly comforted by the morning's chaos. There is at least a sort of noisy normality to the bickering, a reminder that fire or no fire, people are still people, and even misery must be shared. The day wears on in fits and starts. Without fire, breakfast is cold and unappetizing. Water must be fetched by hand, warmed only by the effort it takes to carry it. The chores, feeding animals, patching leaks, sweeping the endless mud from the floor, feel heavier, more futile. You check in on the elders who have assembled in the communal hall, wrapped in every blanket and shawl they own. They debate the events of the night before, each convinced their method for keeping warm is superior. Layered clothing, breathing exercises, strategic placement of house cats. None is willing to admit defeat, even as their teeth chatter in unison. By midday, tempers flare again. A minor disagreement over whose turn it is to use the only dry broom becomes a major scandal, complete with witnesses and character witnesses. Two neighbors argue over a patch of sun, jealously guarding the brief, weak warmth it offers. The geese, for their part, glide through the turmoil like feathered diplomats, serenely unaffected. As the afternoon draws to a close, the villager's energy is spent. The cold is not the kind that invites drama, it is a patient, grinding misery. People retreat indoors, alone with their discomfort and the knowledge that, for all their bluster, nothing has changed. The hearths remain empty. The night ahead promises nothing but more of the same. You return to your own cottage, feeling both heavier and lighter. Heavier for the burdens of the day, lighter because the simple fact that everyone is still here, still bickering, means that not all is lost. There is life, even in complaint. The village is a chorus of grumblers, and you are grateful to belong to it. As darkness creeps in, you burrow under your blankets once more. You listen to the muffled sounds of distant quarrels, a door slamming, a goat bleating, the faint echo of "No Spark" sung by the children, and you smile just a little. Perhaps you think, tomorrow will be warmer, or, at the very least, quieter. It is said that nothing truly unexpected ever happens in your village. The same faces at the well, the same grumbles at the market, the same squabbles over everything from fences to feasts. Even the weather, when it changes, does so only to reinforce the sense that you have lived this day before and will live it again. And so, when a stranger appears at the edge of the lane one brittle morning, it is an event that nearly cracks the world in two. You are among the first to see him, a tall, thin figure, trudging up the frost hardened road, a pack slung over one shoulder, his cloak frayed at the edges. He pauses as he enters the village, scanning the cottages and the steaming breath of villagers moving about their morning chores. His expression is open, curious, and more than a little confused. Word spreads fast, as it always does. Within minutes, old Marta is at your elbow, whispering darkly about spies and sorcerers, while the blacksmith polishes his coldest, heaviest hammer just in case. Children gather at the corner of the square, peeking around barrels and doorways, eyes wide with the hopeful anticipation of a story. You step forward, compelled as much by curiosity as by politeness. "Good morning, traveler," you call, doing your best impression of someone who knows what to say to strangers. He halts, blinking in the weak sunlight. "Good morning," he replies, voice hoarse. "Is this—" He glances down at a crumpled scrap of parchment. "The village of—" He mangles the name beyond recognition. You nod, forgiving him the effort. The formalities are exchanged. His name is Emilian. He comes from a town farther south, and he is on his way somewhere else, though even he seems unsure where. You offer him water and a crust of bread, which he accepts with the gratitude of one who has not had a warm meal in too long. That, of course, is when the trouble begins. You invite him to sit beside your hearth, forgetting for a moment the great, gaping nothing that sits there now. He steps inside, rubs his hands, and glances at the empty space with expectation. "Have you a light?" he asks. It is an innocent question, the sort people have asked for generations. You stare back, baffled, the words slipping through your mind like fish through a net. "A light?" you echo, as if you have never heard the term. The two of you stand in mutual confusion, a silent negotiation over something neither of you can name. After a moment, Emilian shrugs. "Strange. I had a—" He pats his pockets, searches his pack, retrieves a battered tinderbox, and stares at it as if it is an artifact from a lost civilization. He turns it over, frowning, then glances at you. "Do you know how—" You shake your head. The object means nothing. It is heavy. It rattles. It might as well be a stone or a button or the preserved toe of a saint for all it matters. "No," you say, "I do not." The two of you sit, awkward and cold, each hoping the other will remember first. Outside, the village watches. When Emilian finally emerges, the crowd converges, each person eager to hear news from beyond. But the story he brings is not one of hope or comfort. In his village, too, the fire has been lost. No one there remembers how it vanished. Only that one morning, the hearths were empty, the world colder, and the knowledge simply gone. The news is received with a curious blend of disappointment and relief. You are not alone in your forgetfulness. The confusion is not your own private failure, but a sickness that has spread beyond the woods, beyond the rivers, beyond the reach of your geese and your potatoes. The blacksmith asks, "What did you do?" Emilian shrugs. "We tried everything: stones, glass, prayer, even beating two boots together until the neighbors complained. Nothing worked. We waited, hoping someone would remember, but the days grew colder. So I left thinking perhaps another village might know. Old Marta suggests that perhaps fire is not meant to be remembered this year. Perhaps the world, in its infinite wisdom or folly, has decided that you must all live in the dark, if only for a season. This is met with grumbling. The idea that the universe could be so capricious is both comforting, at least it is not your fault, and infuriating. How dare the world forget something so basic? Emilian, for his part, settles in as best he can. He is welcomed with the wary hospitality that the village reserves for strangers. Given a spare blanket, a bowl of watery soup, and a stern warning not to trust the geese. He spends the day wandering from cottage to cottage, offering to share stories in exchange for warmth he cannot find. His tales are oddly familiar. People sitting in circles, singing old songs, making magical shapes with bread and root vegetables, blaming livestock, and waiting for a solution that never comes. At dusk, you find him sitting on the step of the communal hall, staring at the sky. "Does it feel colder here than there?" you ask, joining him. He considers. "No, not colder, just lonelier, maybe. At home, it was my family. Here, I am a guest in someone else's story." You nod. The night gathers around you both. No light, no spark, only the promise of another long vigil against the dark. You talk quietly, comparing memories, as if by pooling your ignorance you might discover something you missed. It does not work, but the company helps. Inside, the villagers debate and quarrel as usual, but now there is a new energy, a sense that the problem is larger than any one person, that perhaps you are all part of a puzzle no one is meant to solve. Some find comfort in this, others despair. Most simply endure as the stars prick the sky. Emilian thanks you for your hospitality, though you know you have offered little. "Perhaps tomorrow," he says, "someone will remember." You wish him good night and close the door against the cold. The fire is still missing, but for the first time, you feel a little less alone in the darkness, warmed by the knowledge that your confusion is shared across miles and villages and hearts. And just outside your window, a goose honks, as if to remind you that absurdity and mystery remain constant companions wherever you go. After the arrival of the stranger and his tales of distant villages similarly shivering in the dark, the village's collective mood lurches from resigned acceptance to a sudden and irrational sense of possibility. If nobody anywhere remembers fire, then perhaps the answer is not with people, but with things. Specifically, with the oldest things, objects that have persisted through generations, surviving memory's erosion with stubborn materiality. So it is that on a morning defined, as all recent mornings are, by cold and low expectations, you find yourself at the center of a new plan. You and a handful of volunteers will search the old barn. The barn stands at the far end of the village, where the last cottages blur into the edge of the woods. It is a place that once served every possible purpose: storing tools, hiding children, sheltering sheep, and, in the days when stories still warmed hearts, housing the annual midsummer feast. Now it is mostly a monument to the past. Beams bowed with age, windows blind with dust, the door a stubborn adversary even to the most determined shoulder. The expedition begins with far more ceremony than is strictly necessary. The blacksmith brings his heaviest lantern, which does little more than cast gloomy shadows. The shaman, now a fixture of village life, clutches her bag of mysterious trinkets. Old Marta arrives armed with her walking stick, and the baker's wife supplies a basket of cold, hard rolls, just in case hunger becomes another foe. You lead the way, pushing open the barn door to a chorus of creaks and sighs. The cold within feels older, somehow, a chill that has seeped into every rafter and board. Your breath forms little clouds that drift and vanish, as if afraid to linger in a place so full of memory. Inside, it is as cluttered as your mind has been these past days. Every surface is covered: broken tools, forgotten barrels, crates filled with oddments of every kind. A rusted plow shares space with a wheelbarrow missing its wheel. From a rafter dangles a faded ribbon, survivor of some long ago celebration. You are struck, for the 100th time, by how easily things outlast the reasons for their existence. The search is not systematic. Each villager drifts toward whatever catches their attention. The blacksmith attacks a pile of crates, convinced the answer lies in old iron. The shaman examines bundles of dried herbs hung from the rafters, muttering hopeful invocations. Old Marta prods at the hay with her stick, unearthing an impressive quantity of mice and a scandalized cat. You find yourself drawn to a dark corner where a stack of old boards hides something oddly shaped. With an effort, you pull it free, a large, lumpy bundle wrapped in layers of cloth. When you unwrap it, you discover a collection of dolls, lovingly made but disturbingly lifeless, their painted faces faded into blankness. For a moment, you wonder if perhaps, in some forgotten year, dolls were used to remember fire, but no revelation arrives. You set them aside, hoping they will not haunt your dreams. The group reconvenes in the center of the barn, the mood even more subdued than when you entered. You compare findings: a cracked oil lamp, a chipped cup, a bundle of dried reeds, a set of antlers, a handful of ancient buttons. The blacksmith triumphantly displays a horseshoe, only to realize it is his own, lost the previous autumn. Just as disappointment threatens to settle, the shaman discovers a slip of parchment tucked between two beams. She reads it aloud, but the words are little more than a riddle. When the memory fades and darkness comes, the circle closes, light returns from where it never left. The villagers debate its meaning for several minutes, but consensus remains elusive. Is it advice, a curse, a recipe for something you have forgotten how to make? Old Marta insists it is proof of magic, or at least of someone with a peculiar sense of humor. The others grumble, hungry and tired. The baker's wife hands out rolls, which everyone gnaws in silence. As you prepare to leave, a wave of futility washes over you. The barn is just a barn, the relics merely relics. You close the door behind you, and for a moment you swear the barn sighs with relief. Outside, the sky is low and gray, the air sharp with the promise of more cold. Still, the search was not entirely for nothing. There is comfort in the effort, in the simple act of doing. For an hour, you and your neighbors worked side by side, searching for answers in the clutter of the past. It is not the warmth you crave, but it is warmth of a different kind, the warmth of shared purpose, even when that purpose is only to prove what is not there. As you walk home, you look back at the barn, its silhouette hunched against the horizon. Maybe, you think, some mysteries are not meant to be solved by searching, but by remembering, or by waiting, or by something else you have not yet learned to name. Night falls, as it always does, but you sleep with the quiet satisfaction of having tried. In your dreams, the barn is alive with flickers of forgotten light, and somewhere, just out of reach, a circle closes and opens, promising that nothing lost is ever truly gone. The night after the fruitless search in the barn is colder than the rest, or perhaps it only feels so because the day held out so little hope. You lie in bed beneath your heap of blankets, fully dressed, arms crossed over your chest, as if you might somehow shield your heart from the chill. Outside, the wind rises and falls in slow, plaintive sighs. You stare at the darkness, half wishing you could sink into it and disappear. Sleep, when it comes, is uneasy, a long, slow descent into a place both familiar and strange. At first, your dreams are a patchwork of the day's events. The barn's clutter, the shaman's riddle, old Marta's triumphant discovery of nothing in particular. But then, as the hours wear on, your mind shifts into something deeper, more mysterious. You are standing in a room that is and is not your own. The walls flicker with a light you do not recognize at first, a trembling brightness that bathes everything in gold and shadow. It pulses gently, neither cold nor warm, but impossibly alive. You realize you are not alone. The villagers are there too, arrayed in a silent circle, faces washed with wonder and longing. In the center of the room, something glows, a shape at once solid and shifting, as if it is made of memory and desire as much as matter. You move closer. It is a flame, and yet not quite a flame as you remember from old stories or fragments of half lost thought. It dances, reaching upward, casting shifting patterns on the walls. It does not consume wood or straw. It simply is, a thing summoned by longing and preserved by will. You reach out a hand. The warmth that radiates from the flame is gentle, enveloping, a memory made real. Your fingers hesitate, not out of fear, but reverence. You are not sure what will happen if you touch it, whether you will wake or change or be burned by some truth your waking mind cannot bear. The villagers begin to murmur, their voices a tide of hope and sorrow. Remember, they whisper, remember. The word echoes around the circle, growing softer with each repetition until it is barely more than a sigh. You look at them, and each face is illuminated in a way that seems to reveal more than the simple shape of a nose, a brow, a mouth. Each is marked by longing, by the ache of memory and loss. The flame grows brighter. You can see now that within its core are smaller flames, each dancing to its own rhythm, one shaped like a child's laugh, another like the taste of fresh bread, another like the feel of a loved one's hand. You realize that fire in your dream is not just heat and light. It is everything that once brought people together, everything that pushed back the darkness, everything that made you feel alive. You reach further, desperate to hold on to this vision. Your hand closes on the light, and just for a moment, you feel something, a warmth that seeps into your bones, a sense of belonging so fierce it makes your heart ache. The villagers' murmurs become a song, one you know without knowing, a melody woven from childhood, from old stories, from laughter and grief. Then, inevitably, the dream shifts, the flame flickers and pulls away. You chase after it, stumbling through corridors that lengthen and darken with every step. The light recedes, becoming first a distant glow, then a pinpoint, then nothing at all. The song fades. You are alone in the dark once more. You wake with a start, heart hammering, fingers curled into the blanket as if you are still trying to hold something. For a moment, you expect to find the room lit by a golden glow, your neighbors assembled in silent celebration. Instead, there is only the pale suggestion of morning and the familiar, unwelcome cold. You lie there, unwilling to move, desperate to cling to the sensation. For the first time since the forgetting, you remember not the steps, not the trick, not the answer, but the feeling. The certainty that warmth is possible, that light can return, that fire is not gone, but waiting to be remembered. You rise and stumble to the window. Outside, the village is unchanged, roofs dusted with frost, smokeless chimneys, people moving through their morning routines with a kind of stubborn resignation. You see the shaman emerge from her cottage, rubbing sleep from her eyes. She glances up, catches your gaze, and for an instant, you are sure she has dreamed something similar. There is a question in her eyes, a silent hope that dares not yet speak its name. You dress and go outside, drawn by the need to share your dream, or at least to test the feeling it left behind. You find the blacksmith repairing a broken fence, his breath a pale plume. You find old Marta feeding her eternally hungry goats. You find the children playing in the lane, their laughter bright in the frigid air. You ask each one, carefully, if they dreamed of anything last night. Most shake their heads or mumble about restless sleep. One child says she dreamed of flying over the rooftops, carried by a goose. Only the shaman pauses, looking at you with the weight of unshed words. Did you see it? You ask, not sure what you mean. She nods slowly. I think so. I think we all did. Once. You stand together in the morning light, the world unchanged, your hearts quietly altered. The dream has not given you fire, but it has left a seed, a sense that perhaps what was lost can be found again, not in things or rituals, but in the persistence of memory. The day unfolds as always, chores, squabbles, cold, yet you catch glimpses now and then of something different, a softer glance between neighbors, a shared smile, a willingness to help that feels more genuine than before. Perhaps you think fire is not only a thing of tinder and flint, but also of people, hope, and the stubborn refusal to let go of what matters. As night falls again, you prepare for sleep, uncertain what dreams will come. But you go to bed believing, for the first time, that memory may be stronger than forgetting, and that warmth, however lost, is never entirely beyond reach. Morning arrives with its usual chill, but there is something restless in the air. Perhaps it is your dream lingering in the corners of your mind, or perhaps it is simply that the villagers, after so many days of confusion and ritual, are desperate for distraction. Either way, you sense a shift, not dramatic, not miraculous, but a kind of stirring, as if the whole village is waiting for something, anything, to break the monotony of cold and confusion. You are drawn outside by the laughter of children, shrill, defiant, entirely at odds with the sluggishness of the adults. They are gathered at the edge of the green, bundled in two large coats, their breath swirling in clouds as they run in circles, shouting rules to a game that changes with every lap. You watch for a while, quietly envious of their ability to lose themselves in the moment. Eventually, you notice something different. The children have abandoned their running in favor of an activity that, at first glance, appears as pointless as any other. Two of them are sitting cross legged in the mud, each with a pair of sticks, furiously rubbing them together. The others gather around, offering encouragement and advice in that tone children reserve for things they have only just invented, but are already certain they are experts in. You approach, curiosity piqued. What are you doing? You ask, expecting the usual shrugs and nonsense. One of the children, a wiry boy with a scabbed nose, looks up at you with a seriousness that is almost comical. Making fire, he says, as if the answer should be obvious. There is a ripple of laughter from the adults nearby. Old Marta, passing by with a bucket of water, snorts. You will have better luck rubbing your own ears together, she mutters, but she stops to watch just the same. The children pay the skepticism no mind. They rub the sticks with growing determination, brows furrowed, hands moving in frantic, clumsy rhythm. One girl adds a bit of straw from her pocket. For magic, she says, her eyes shining with hope. Another places a few dry leaves in a careful pile, then guards them fiercely against the wind and the ever curious geese. You find yourself drawn into their effort. You kneel down, remembering the feel of wood in your own childhood hands. There is something hypnotic about the repetition, the slow heating of the sticks, the faint scent of crushed grass and earth. Others join in, first a few children, then a handful of adults, each secretly hoping to be present at the moment when the world shifts back to what it should be. For a long while, nothing happens. The sticks squeak and scrape, raising a few blisters and much laughter, but the leaves remain stubbornly untouched. Yet, the children do not give up. They switch partners, swap sticks, try different methods, rolling, twisting, pressing, tapping. The shaman, observing from a distance, offers gentle suggestions. Go slower, be patient, listen to the sound. The afternoon sun reaches its highest, though it brings no real warmth. You are about to suggest a break, your knees protesting, your fingers numb, when a gasp breaks the spell. The boy with the scabbed nose holds up his sticks, and there it is, a wisp of smoke, faint and tentative, rising from the tiny pile of leaves. For a moment, no one moves. The village seems to hold its breath, as if afraid that even the slightest movement will scare the smoke away. The boy leans closer, blowing gently. The others crowd around, shielding the spot from the wind. Another puff of smoke curls upward, and then, miraculously, impossibly, a tiny, uncertain spark glimmers among the leaves. The reaction is immediate and chaotic. Some children cheer, others jump back in shock. A few adults burst into nervous applause. Old Marta weeps openly, declaring that she always knew the answer would come from good, stubborn foolishness. The geese, unimpressed, saunter off to investigate more promising prospects. The spark does not last. It flickers, struggles, and dies in the damp air, but it is enough. It is proof, not just of possibility, but of the power of trying, of refusing to accept that what is forgotten is gone for good. Encouraged, the children try again and again and again. Each time they get a little closer, a little more smoke, a slightly brighter spark. The adults, caught up in the excitement, begin to search their memories for old tricks. What kind of wood to use, how to shape the sticks, what words to whisper to coax the fire into being. The shaman kneels beside the children, her hands guiding theirs, her voice low and soothing. It is not just the hands, she says, but the patience, the will, the belief that it can be done. By evening, there is still no true fire, nothing to warm your hands by, nothing to light the night. But something has changed. The sense of helplessness that has weighed on the village for so long has lifted just a little. There is hope, raw and flickering, as fragile as the first spark. That night, you gather in the communal hall. The children are the heroes of the hour, their hands blistered, their faces glowing with pride. The adults share stories of small victories, of other times when the impossible became possible simply because someone refused to give up. As you prepare for another cold night, you remember the dream, the flame that was more than a flame, the warmth that was more than heat. You begin to believe that the children, with their stubbornness and joy, might lead you all back to what was lost. You go to sleep, smiling, your heart lighter than it has been in days, the memory of smoke still curling in your mind. Tomorrow, you tell yourself, perhaps the spark will catch. Morning comes with an odd energy, a nervous excitement under the routine grumbling. For the first time in what feels like 100 years, the villagers have something to discuss other than potatoes, geese, or the missing fire itself. Word has spread. The children made smoke yesterday, a real, proper wisp, witnessed by dozens, retold by hundreds, exaggerated by everyone. Old Marta says it was as thick as a blacksmith's bellows. The baker's wife swears she smelled bread baking for a heartbeat. The shaman claims the leaves glowed with a mystical aura. Children wake up early and drag their parents back to the spot on the village green. The adults come too, though they pretend it is just to keep an eye on the little ones or to learn what not to do. Soon, a circle forms, wider this time, tense with hope and skepticism. You join, not as a leader or expert, but as a witness, secretly as eager as anyone else to see magic. The experiment begins with the same blisters and blunders as before. Sticks are broken, leaves are damp. The children quarrel over whose hands are too cold or too sweaty. The shaman hovers, offering advice only when asked. Old Marta supervises with the stern authority of a general. Then, as the sun climbs, a new attempt. The same scab nosed boy, hands raw and determined, presses stick to stick. The shaman encourages him to breathe slowly, to listen. The village leans in. Suddenly, it happens. A real, honest to goodness spark. It leaps from wood to leaf, a bead of brightness so small you almost miss it, until, with a faint sizzle, a tiny curl of smoke follows. The spark flares up, catching a bit of dry grass, and for a single impossible moment, there is fire in the center of the circle. The reaction is instantaneous. Everyone freezes, wide eyed. The children recoil with a chorus of startled shrieks. Several adults back away, tripping over each other as if a wolf had appeared among the geese. The blacksmith drops his mug, spilling cold tea everywhere. Old Marta gasps and clutches her chest. The baker's wife cries out, "Careful!" It bites, as if the spark might leap up and chase her through the square. You find yourself half laughing, half terrified. The sight of fire so tiny, so delicate, so utterly normal, seems unnatural now. For days, weeks, maybe longer, it has existed only in memory and dreams. Now, returned, it is as awe inspiring as it is alarming. The children, regaining their courage, creep closer. The boy who made the spark beams with pride, but even he seems slightly afraid to touch it. One girl throws a handful of leaves onto the fire, hoping to help. Instead, She smothers it completely, and the spark is gone as quickly as it came. There is a moment of stunned silence, followed by chaos. Everyone talks at once, offering advice and blame, recounting what they saw and how it could have been done better. The shaman steps in, raising her hands for calm. It is all right to be frightened, she says. Fire remembers us as much as we remember it. The blacksmith, recovered from his shock, suggests fetching the village's oldest tongs and moving the experiment to his forge. At least there, he argues, fire is meant to be contained. Some villagers agree, eager to be rid of the dangerous magic in the open air. Others insist the fire belongs on the green, where all can see it. Amidst the arguments, the children try again. This time, every movement is watched, every breath held. The spark returns, smaller than before, flickering at the edge of possibility. This time, the villagers do not run, but neither do they step forward. You realize, watching their faces, that forgetting is not just the loss of skill or memory, but the fading of courage. Fire is not merely a tool, it is a thing to be trusted, courted, and feared all at once. Old Marta, stubborn as always, is the first to break the spell. She kneels by the children and cups her hands around the new spark, shielding it from the wind. Her hands tremble, but her voice is steady. There you are, you little devil, she says softly. Come back to us now. With care and patience, she feeds the spark, adding tiny scraps of straw and dry grass. Others join in, passing bits of kindling, whispering encouragement, as if to a sickly animal. The fire flickers, grows, dies down, grows again. Each time it is lost, it returns a little easier, a little brighter. The villagers draw nearer, their fear fading into awe, then wonder. The children's giggles return. The adults begin to remember not just how to make fire, but how to care for it. As dusk falls, a single stubborn flame stands on the green, small but persistent, guarded by the whole village. No one suggests leaving it unattended, not after such an effort. You watch as people take turns keeping watch, feeding it carefully, speaking to it as if it is both a guest and a newborn. That night, as you slip beneath your blankets, you hear laughter from the green, stories told by firelight. For the first time in a year, you sleep, knowing the village has remembered more than a trick. They have remembered bravery, patience, and the strange joy of facing the unknown together. Tomorrow, you think, there will be more sparks and less fear. Morning in the village has changed. It is not warmer exactly. Winter still leans heavily against every door, but the air is alive with expectation, with the stubborn and exhilarating knowledge that the impossible has already happened, if only for a moment. You wake before dawn, drawn by a strange glow that creeps through the gaps in your shutters. On the green, a cluster of villagers huddles around the remains of the night's small fire. Someone, almost certainly old Marta, has kept the flame alive, feeding it slivers of wood and whispered encouragement. The children, emboldened by their victory, bounce from foot to foot, eager for another chance to spark the impossible into life. Today's task is clear. If one tiny fire is possible, surely a bigger one is within reach. The blacksmith, whose pride was wounded by his initial fear, has thrown himself into the effort with a kind of grim enthusiasm, directing the collection of logs, branches, and anything remotely flammable. The baker's wife produces an entire armful of stale loaves, muttering that even the crows will not eat them, so let the flames try. By mid morning, the green is dominated by a bonfire in the making, a wobbling pyramid of logs, twigs, oddments of furniture too rickety to serve another winter, and the sacrifices of several generations of broken brooms. The pile towers higher with each addition, and the village gathers around it, their faces split between excitement and terror. There is a moment of chaos as everyone tries to claim a place in the ritual. The children insist they must light the fire because we remembered first. The elders demand oversight for safety, and the blacksmith wields his tongs like a scepter. The shaman tries to instill order, proposing a song of gratitude, but is quickly drowned out by arguments about whether bread or branches should go on top. Finally, after much squabbling, a consensus is reached. The children will bring the first spark, the blacksmith will supervise closely, and old Marta will say a few words, which turn out to be a blend of encouragement, threats, and detailed instructions about not burning down the village. The moment arrives. The boy with the scabbed nose, now a local hero, crouches with his sticks. The crowd falls silent, except for a goose, who insists on honking at the most dramatic moments. The spark flares, the kindling catches, and, with a collective gasp, the bonfire comes alive, first as a hesitant flicker, then as a surging, glorious column of flame. The response is, in a word, ridiculous. The children leap back, squealing and clapping. The adults stand in a wide circle, eyes wide, faces bathed in the dancing light, as if witnessing a miracle. The baker's wife tears up, swearing she will never complain about burnt crusts again. The blacksmith laughs a little too loudly, as if to prove his courage to himself. The shaman starts a chant that quickly devolves into off key singing, but no one seems to mind. People behave as though they have never seen fire before, which, in a way, is true. They approach it with reverence, poking at it with long sticks, arguing over whose stick is the best. Someone proposes making tea, forgetting there are no hot coals yet. A few villagers warm their hands, then instantly worry about getting too close. A dog barks at the flames, then runs in circles as the children try to calm it with crusts of burnt bread. Old Marta, having delivered her speech, declares the event a success and immediately takes charge of roasting onions and potatoes in the embers. The aroma draws even the most skeptical villagers from their doorways, and soon the air is filled with laughter, chatter, and the occasional frantic chase after a rolling, half-burnt onion. It does not take long for a kind of communal amnesia to set in, not of fire this time, but of cold, of fear, of the long days of forgetfulness. Faces glow, stories are told, songs are sung, many about fire, several about potatoes, and at least one about a goose who saves a village from eternal winter. The blacksmith organizes a contest For who can hold their hand closest to the flames without yelping, which quickly devolves into much yelping and accusations of cheating? Not everything is perfect. There are squabbles. Who gets the first roasted potato? Who is responsible for keeping the fire fed? Who let the geese get into the breadbasket? The children, briefly united by triumph, revert to arguing over whose spark was the real first. The elders warn against letting the flames get too high, and the shaman reminds everyone, remember, fire is a guest, not a servant. But beneath the chaos, a sense of wonder persists. The bonfire burns through the day, drawing everyone together. People who have not spoken in weeks find themselves laughing side by side. Even the geese seem less antagonistic, content to bask in the warmth and snatch the occasional offering. As night falls, the flames cast long, leaping shadows over the green. The villagers linger, reluctant to leave. You find yourself sitting near the fire, listening to old stories, some you know, others half invented on the spot. The fire, you realize, is more than heat or light. It is a kind of memory, a shared miracle, ridiculous and sacred, born from the stubbornness of children and the willingness of adults to be fools together. When you finally return to your cottage, your hair smells of smoke and your heart is strangely light. You slip into bed, warmed by more than just the memory of fire. Tomorrow, you know, there will be new arguments, new worries. But tonight, the whole village has remembered how to be ridiculous, and how, in the face of darkness, that is sometimes the bravest thing of all. The bonfire's miracle lingers in the air, woven through the village like smoke. Word of it travels to every cottage, every barn, even to the edge of the woods, where the crows and the most suspicious geese keep their distance. It is not long before a new idea stirs, a feeling that something extraordinary has happened, and, according to the ancient and unwritten laws of village life, extraordinary things demand extraordinary responses. The shaman, ever alert for such moments, senses her chance. By midday, she is at the center of the green, purple shawl flying behind her like a banner, voice carrying farther than the village criers ever did. We have remembered the fire, she declares, and now we must celebrate, lest we forget it again. There is no room for debate. Her certainty is infectious. After a long season of worry, even the most reserved villagers find it difficult to resist. She outlines her plan. Tonight, there will be a festival, a dance around the fire. There will be songs, some remembered, most invented on the spot, games, some sensible, most not, and above all, a dance that will bind the memory of fire to the village so tightly that it can never again slip away. No one is quite sure what this means, but the prospect of distraction and collective foolishness is more enticing than another night huddled in silent gratitude. Preparations begin immediately. The baker's wife volunteers to bake whatever is left of the stale bread into shapes that might be called festive if one is feeling generous. The blacksmith offers up a handful of iron rings, tokens of luck, he claims, though the real reason is to clear out his workbench. Old Marta organizes a committee, to gather all available root vegetables, reasoning that no true celebration can take place without something to stew. The children collect wildflowers, dried grass, and anything remotely colorful, decorating the green with haphazard exuberance. As dusk falls, the bonfire is coaxed back to its brightest blaze, fed with the remnants of broken chairs and even a mysterious moth eaten quilt that nobody can remember owning. The villagers assemble, wrapped in shawls, clutching mugs of warm broth or cups of weak cider. The shaman calls everyone to the fire, her voice echoing, "Tonight, we are not just survivors, we are rememberers." The dance begins awkwardly. There are no practiced steps, only a vague idea that one should move in a circle, avoiding elbows and the more aggressive geese. The shaman starts with sweeping gestures, spinning and clapping her hands above her head. The children copy her immediately, their energy carrying the adults into motion. Soon, the whole village is in motion, shuffling, hopping, stamping, twirling, some with grace, many without, but all with a determination that borders on heroic. You find yourself swept along, your arms linked with those of the blacksmith on one side and the baker's wife on the other. The air is filled with laughter, off key singing, and the occasional warning shout as a child or goose gets too close to the flames. The shaman's song rises above the chaos, a chant of gratitude and hope. The words barely matter. It is the rhythm and the shared joy that bind you all together. The dance grows faster, messier, wilder. Blankets swirl like capes, faces are flushed, shoes are trampled, and for a time, the boundaries between old and young, neighbor and stranger, melt in the fire's glow. Even the elders, initially determined to supervise from the sidelines, are drawn in, first with polite tapping, then with a defiant two-step that quickly devolves into laughter. At the height of the celebration, the shaman leads a chant to seal the fire in your bones. She urges everyone to speak a memory of warmth, real or imagined, into the flames. One by one, villagers share the taste of hot stew after a long day in the fields, the feel of a parent's hand on a cold night, the memory of light reflected in a lover's eyes. Some memories are funny, others sad, many invented on the spot. Each is greeted with applause, laughter, and sometimes tears. The geese, never ones to miss a spectacle, circle the edges of the dance, honking approvingly or indignantly as the mood strikes them. A few children attempt to herd them into the dance, with mixed results and much chaos. The festival spills into games, potato races, a contest to see who can hop on one foot the longest, and an attempt at storytelling that devolves into friendly arguments about which story is truer. The fire burns brighter as the night deepens, the sparks leaping skyward as if eager to join the stars. Food is passed, cider is shared, and every so often someone shouts, "Remember this," as if naming the moment will preserve it forever. It is late before the dance finally slows, the circles growing smaller, the music softer, laughter fading to gentle conversation. The shaman stands by the fire, her face aglow, and thanks everyone for their part in the night's magic. We have remembered, she says, and we will remember again. The fire is ours, not just to use, but to celebrate. The village lingers, reluctant to leave the warmth and company. Some drift home, cheeks flushed, still humming bits of song. Others stay by the fire until only embers remain, telling stories or simply sitting in the comfortable silence that follows a night well spent. You go to bed exhausted, your legs aching from the dance, your mind spinning with memories, real, imagined, and somewhere in between. As you drift into sleep, you hear the echoes of laughter, the crackle of flames, and the quiet, fierce certainty that even in the coldest darkness, a village can choose joy. Tomorrow, of course, life will return to its usual worries, chores, squabbles, and all the small burdens of survival. But tonight, in the fire's light, you have all become keepers of a memory that will be harder to lose. The festival's echoes linger long after the last song fades. The next morning, you wake with sore legs and a hoarse voice, but there is an unfamiliar lightness in your chest. The fire, no longer a shy guest, but a true companion, smolders at the heart of the village green. A few villagers keep watch, carefully tending the embers, their faces marked with pride and a new sort of calm. Gone is the creeping dread of endless cold. Gone, too, is the sharp edge of worry that has gnawed at every waking moment. Instead, the village is filled with the aroma of possibility, a perfume of wood smoke, roasted vegetables, and something subtler, contentment. By midday, the transformation is unmistakable. The green, once a barren expanse of mud and frost, has become a place of gathering. A ragged ring of villagers sits around the fire, sharing stories, food, and laughter. Every so often, someone adds a log or a handful of straw, feeding the flame with practiced ease and a quiet reverence. Children dart through the crowd, their faces smeared with ash and joy. Most notable of all is the return of smell, a rich, comforting haze that floats on the air, wraps itself around your senses, and settles somewhere deep inside you. Roasted onions, potatoes crisped in their skins, parsnips caramelized at the edges, even a few sausages produced by the butcher for special occasions, and now deemed special enough. For days, the village has eaten cold bread and raw roots. Now, every meal is an event. You watch as the baker's wife, her hair wild, her apron stained, brings out a pan of hard bread softened with broth and a dusting of herbs. The blacksmith offers up skewers of meat and turnip, roasting them over the coals with a seriousness usually reserved for shoeing horses. Old Marta distributes bowls of stew from a cauldron so large it must have taken 4 people to carry it from her hearth to the fire. The children roast apples on sticks, most of which end up dropped, trampled, or given to the geese, who are finally content to beg instead of scheme. With each passing hour, the village seems to knit itself closer together. The petty squabbles of the fireless days recede, replaced by the kind of gentle teasing that marks true comfort. Someone retells the story of the first spark, embellishing it further. Someone else starts a rumor that the fire was really a gift from the geese, quickly denied by everyone who has ever been bitten. The shaman leads a quiet song, softer than last night's wild chant, but no less heartfelt. Peace settles, not as a dramatic revelation, but as a series of small, ordinary moments. You notice it in the way people linger after eating, sharing scraps of news and plans for the coming days. You see it in the older villagers who have stopped grumbling and now seem content to simply sit by the fire, staring into its heart as if memorizing its every flicker. Even the dogs, formerly bundles of nerves, stretch out at the edges of the warmth, dozing in the sun. You catch yourself smiling at nothing in particular. The memory of the dark, fireless nights is still there, but it no longer rules your thoughts. Instead, you feel a kind of fragile gratitude for food that is more than sustenance, for warmth that is more than survival, for the return of the ordinary things that make life worth living. The shaman sits beside you, her shawl singed at the hem. It feels like the village has woken up, she says quietly. You nod. It feels like a dream you do not want to forget. She glances at the fire, then at you. That is why we must remember, not just the fire, but everything it brings. The day passes with a rhythm you had almost forgotten. Work, rest, laughter, companionship. Someone suggests starting a new tradition, an annual festival to mark the night when the fire returned. There are enthusiastic agreements and a few half hearted groans, but no one truly objects. As evening settles, the fire burns brighter, flames licking the sky as if eager to reach the stars. Dinner is a haphazard banquet: roasted meat, bread crisped at the edges, sweet carrots, sour cabbage, apples, even the odd stolen sausage retrieved from a goose's beak. The meal is unrushed, shared with no thought for scarcity or complaint. Afterward, the villagers drift into small groups, some telling stories, others singing quietly, a few simply sitting and staring at the fire, letting its warmth sink deep into tired bones. The geese, finally full, settle at the edge of the green, heads tucked under wings. Night comes gently, wrapping the village in the glow of contentment. The fire is not just a memory reclaimed, but a bond renewed, a promise that together you can face forgetting and remembering alike. As you prepare for sleep, you feel the comfort of roasted food and the comfort of company, the sense that the village, for all its eccentricity and stubbornness, has rediscovered itself. You fall asleep with the scent of wood smoke in your hair and the certainty that peace, like fire, is a thing that must be fed, tended, and never taken for granted. The days after the festival pass with a new and peculiar sense of order. Where there was once only confusion and frantic activity, there is now routine. Fire, having made its improbable return, slips quietly into the background of village life, as if it had never been gone at all. Smoke once again curls from every chimney. The blacksmith's forge glows with renewed industry. Even the baker's oven produces crusts so dark and hearty that they become the subject of competitive boasting. But as peace settles in, something odd happens. The villagers begin to act as though nothing ever went awry. At first, it is subtle, a missing memory here, a willful oversight there. You notice it in the way the blacksmith answers the children's questions about the great fireless days. Oh, it was nothing, he says, waving a hand. Just a bit of cold weather, that is all. Happens every winter. His voice is cheerful, almost bored, as though he himself did not jump at the sight of the first spark or stand, shivering in the square, red faced and humbled. Old Marta, who spent a week extolling the virtues of potato magic, now insists she never doubted fire's return. I told you all, just needed to air out the chimneys, she declares, as if she had not wept openly at the sight of the first flame. The baker's wife, when asked about the raw dough and cold loaves, laughs it off. We simply fancied a change. Nothing wrong with a little variety. The shaman, who led the wildest celebration in living memory, is perhaps the only one who refuses to participate in the collective amnesia. She will occasionally mention the time we danced for fire, but her words are met with polite smiles and quick subject changes. Even the children, so recently the heroes of the village, are told to mind their chores and stop telling stories. You watch this performance unfold with a mix of amusement and disbelief. The memory of cold, dark nights is still sharp in your mind. The brittle ache in your hands, the restless sleep, the uneasy silence broken only by the shiver of the wind. You remember the arguments, the wild experiments, the desperate hope that the next day might bring warmth. Now, it seems, everyone else remembers only what they wish to. Life goes on. The festival's embers are swept away. Blankets are packed into chests, the last of the roasted vegetables eaten or turned into soup. The villagers return to their usual disputes over fences, goats, whose rooster crows first. If someone mentions the days without fire, it is only in passing, and always with a shrug or a chuckle. The children, sensing the change, adapt quickly. They invent new games, ones that have nothing to do with sticks or sparks. If they talk about fire at all, it is in whispers, a secret language of memory that adults pretend not to hear. Even the geese, who profited most from the chaos, are back to their usual mischief, stealing bread and hissing at anyone who comes too close. You find yourself both frustrated and oddly comforted by the collective forgetting. There is something deeply human about the village's refusal to dwell on hardship. Perhaps it is a kind of wisdom, a way of protecting themselves from memories too sharp to hold. Or perhaps it is simply pride, the unwillingness to admit, even to themselves, that they were ever helpless. At a village meeting, the elder calls for order and, without a hint of irony, thanks everyone for their steady hands and calm heads during the winter. No mention is made of the shivering nights, the frantic rituals, or the dance around the fire. You catch the shaman's eye. She smiles, a quiet, knowing smile, and for a moment you feel a secret kinship, a small rebellion against the smooth surface of forgetfulness. In the evenings, you sometimes sit by your hearth, watching the flames and remembering. You recall the feeling of that first spark, the rush of relief and terror, the way the village came together in the face of uncertainty. You realize that these memories, though not spoken, are still yours to keep. And so the days settle into something like normalcy. The world, once again, is a place of routines and small joys. Yet beneath it all, you sense the ghost of what was lost and found, a silent bond between those who remember and those who choose to forget. One evening, you write it all down, just in case, a record of how the village lost its fire and found it again. You tuck the pages away, certain that someday someone will want to know. For now, though, you play your part in the gentle charade. When a neighbor remarks on how steady the winter was, you nod, smile, and change the subject, like everyone else. The village, having survived darkness together, now survives the memory of it apart, each person tending to their own small flame, careful not to let it grow too bright. There are days when the memory of the fireless season grows as faint as smoke on the wind. But there are also nights, clear and cold, when you cannot sleep, and it seems that if you do not preserve what happened, it will vanish for good. The village's greatest confusion slipping into oblivion like so many lost potatoes. So, you resolve to keep a record. You begin with the smallest details. The feeling of waking in a cottage so cold you thought your breath would freeze before it reached your nose. The sight of your neighbors, bleary eyed and bundled, gathering at the well for warmth that did not come. You record the children's games, the arguments about potatoes and onions, the way everyone grew irritable and superstitious as the nights dragged on and nothing changed. You write in a thin, spidery hand, your ink freezing in the well if you pause too long. At first, your words stumble and falter. Who would ever want to remember these days? But as the pages fill, you realize this is not just about fire, but about people. How quickly they argue, how quickly they forgive, how even in the coldest hour, someone will find something to laugh at. A joke about geese, a story about a particularly uncooperative potato, a song sung badly but bravely. You include all of it. The Council of Elders, assembled in grand confusion, their wisdom scattered like chaff. The shaman's arrival, her certainty and her shawl, her voice ringing out over the green in song and in command. The many, many attempts to light fire with milk, with song, with potatoes, with sheer determination and collective stubbornness. You record the day the children made smoke for the first time, their blisters, their pride, their certainty that the impossible could be coaxed into reality with nothing but sticks and hope. You describe the first spark, the terror and amazement, the way grown men and women jumped back in fear as if fire were a wild animal let loose among sheep. The wild, ridiculous celebration that followed, the festival around the bonfire, the dance that wove the memory of warmth into everyone's bones. You do not shy away from the less noble parts, the quarrels, the pettiness, the way the village immediately began pretending nothing had happened the moment the worst was over. You note how quickly people returned to their old arguments, their proud denial of ever having been afraid. You write down the conversations you overheard, old Marta insisting she never lost hope, the blacksmith boasting that he always knew how to keep the fire going, the baker's wife insisting that cold bread was a choice. But you record, too, The silent understandings, the looks shared around the fire on the night after the festival, when everyone knew, even if they would not say it, that something important had happened. How, for a while, the village was truly together, fearful, foolish, hopeful, but together. You make a note of the small, private kindnesses, a neighbor leaving wood at your door, a child sharing a roasted onion with the dog, the shaman's song at dusk when most had gone home, but a few remained to listen. Your chronicle grows, sprawling and untidy. You title it The Chronicle of Forgetful Fire, thinking that even if nobody reads it, the name alone will remind someone, someday, that this village once forgot and remembered together. Sometimes, as you write, you hear the laughter of the children outside, already inventing new games, already half forgetting their triumph. The geese wander by, as smug as ever, occasionally pecking at your door for crumbs. You find yourself smiling at the absurdity of it all. You wonder sometimes whether to include your own part in the story. You decide to be honest. You were frightened, you were foolish, you were as lost as everyone else. But you also tried to remember, tried to help, tried to keep hope alive when it was easier to give in to despair. If anyone reads your chronicle, let them know it was not courage that brought back the fire, but the refusal to stop looking for it. When the chronicle is finished, at least, as finished as any story of forgetting and remembering can ever be, you tie the pages with a bit of twine and hide them in the hollow behind your hearthstone. It is a fitting place, you think, for the record of such a season, a place of warmth, of memory, of daily, stubborn magic. You do not tell anyone about your chronicle, not yet. Some things, you decide, are best discovered by accident, by a child on a cold morning, or a grandchild who cannot sleep, or a shaman searching for inspiration before the next festival. For now, you step outside and watch the village return to its ordinary life. The smoke rising from chimneys, the geese haggling over scraps, the sound of a song drifting from the green. You feel a quiet satisfaction, knowing that whatever happens next year or the year after, there is a record, a fragile, hopeful memory, waiting for someone to remember what was lost and how it was found. The year moves on. The snow melts, trickles of water carving paths through the mud and carrying away the last traces of winter's grip. The days grow longer, the air softer, and the fields, always so stubborn, begin to green at the edges. In the village, life resumes its usual rhythm, planting, tending, arguing, mending, all the ordinary things that together make the world feel knowable. You watch as children run with kites made from scraps of cloth, their laughter sharp and bright as the spring air. The blacksmith, flushed with new purpose, forges horseshoes that ring like bells. The baker's wife invents new bread recipes, insisting each is old family wisdom, though you know she makes them up on the spot. Even old Marta, never one to let a crisis pass quietly, finds new things to worry over: late sprouts, greedy crows, the prospect of a summer so hot that even geese will beg for shade. But underneath this return to normalcy lies a quiet anticipation, a strange awareness that all is temporary. The festival of fire becomes a memory as soon as the first shoots push up through the earth. But in the eyes of the villagers, there lingers a shared knowledge, one they rarely speak of, but all seem to feel. You catch it in glances exchanged over the well, in the way people stockpile kindling, in the care with which every new fire is coaxed from the embers. You keep your chronicle hidden behind the hearth, every so often checking to see that the pages remain safe and dry. You add a note now and then, a new recipe for kindling, a child's drawing of the fire dance, a line overheard at market. Do you remember the cold? No, but I do remember the singing. These small, ordinary entries seem precious, talismans against the forgetting you sense waiting at the edge of memory. Summer arrives with fanfare. The geese are lazier now, sprawling in the sun, but they keep a wary eye on the villagers, as if they too expect something to be forgotten, some power to slip away. The shaman announces a midsummer festival to honor the fire that stays with us. The celebration is smaller, more casual, songs, a simple feast, a single bonfire lit at dusk, children running wild while adults pretend not to worry. There is laughter, there is food, but there is also a pause as the sun sets, a collective, silent question, as if everyone is testing their memory, daring themselves to remember not just how to make fire, but what it means to be together in the darkness. Autumn creeps in. The fields are gathered, the days shorten. The villagers start to talk in cautious tones about the coming cold. There is more wood staked by each door, more careful saving of fat and flour, more reminders to never let the hearth go out, not even for a moment. Still, no one quite says what they fear, that the forgetting will return, as certain as the frost, as mysterious as the wind that brings the first snow. You prepare in your own way. You mend blankets, patch holes in the cottage roof, dry herbs and roots for the long season ahead. You memorize the steps to the fire dance, humming the tune under your breath as you work. You walk the green on cool evenings, watching the way the light shifts across the rooftops, how the shadows grow bolder as the sun slips away. You practice lighting the hearth again and again until the movement feels as natural as breathing. You wonder if this year will be different. Perhaps, you hope, the memory will hold. Perhaps the chronicle, waiting in its secret place, will be found at just the right moment. Or perhaps, as always, the village will wake one morning to find the fire forgotten, and the long ritual of rediscovery will begin anew. You do not fear it as you once did. There is a comfort in the cycle, in knowing that even forgetting is not the end, only a pause, a wintering of memory that always ends in spring. You are no longer anxious that your neighbors will deny the past or pretend nothing happened. You have seen that in the end, the village always remembers what matters, even if only in the shape of a song or the warmth of a meal shared on a cold night. As the first frost appears on the grass, you tuck yourself in early, watching the flames dance in your hearth. The geese settle by the pond, the children huddle together in games that blend fear and laughter. The adults glance at the sky and at each other, quietly measuring what they might lose and what they hope to keep. You fall asleep thinking of the coming season, its silence, its darkness, its inevitable forgetting. You hope someone will find your chronicle. You hope someone will remember the feeling of the first spark, the absurd dances, the taste of roasted onions on a night when hope was nearly lost. But most of all, you rest knowing that when the forgetting comes, as it always does, you and the village will learn again. Together, you will remember the fire